I thought I knew what family meant. Growing up in suburban Ohio, our house was always filled with laughter during Sunday dinners and holiday gatherings. My parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins created this warm circle of love that I believed would never break. I was the golden child, the one everyone was proud of, destined for great things. But sometimes the people closest to you can become your greatest enemies. Sometimes a single lie can destroy everything you have ever known and loved. Sometimes the truth takes 10 long years to surface. Before I start this story, let me know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because this journey of betrayal and redemption will show you how sometimes losing everything teaches you who you really are. The Patterson family gatherings were legendary in our neighborhood. Every major holiday, birthday, or celebration brought together nearly 30 relatives in my grandmother's sprawling farmhouse. I remember the smell of her famous apple pie mixing with my aunt's homemade rolls, the sound of my uncle's guitar as he led us in old folk songs, and the warmth of being surrounded by people who shared my DNA and my dreams. As the eldest grandchild, I held a special place in everyone's heart. My father worked as a mechanical engineer, my mother taught elementary school, and they both pushed me to excel academically. By 25, I had graduated summa cum laude from Ohio State University with a degree in marketing and landed a prestigious position at a Cincinnati advertising firm. I was dating Robert, a kind attorney, who made me laugh and treated me like a queen. Life felt like it was unfolding exactly as it should. My cousin Jessica was 8 years younger, the daughter of my father's younger brother. While I was busy with college and career, Jessica struggled through high school with average grades and seemed to drift through life without much direction. She lived with her parents in the same small town where we grew up, working part-time at a local retail store and spending most evenings at home. There was always something in her eyes when she looked at me during family gatherings, something I could never quite identify but chose to ignore. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. Jessica would tell small lies about her accomplishments, claiming she got promoted when she had not, or saying she was dating someone impressive when she was single. She would exaggerate stories to make herself sound more interesting or important. But these seemed like harmless fabrications from a young woman trying to find her place in the world. I never imagined she was capable of something truly destructive. The night that changed everything was my grandfather's 75th birthday party in September. The whole family had gathered at his house for a barbecue celebration. I had just received a major promotion at work, and Robert had been hinting about marriage, so I was in particularly high spirits. The evening was perfect, with my grandfather holding court on the back porch, telling stories from his youth while the younger cousins played games in the yard. Around 9 o'clock, I found myself alone with Jessica in the living room. She seemed quiet and withdrawn, which was unusual for her normally bubbly demeanor. When I asked if she was feeling all right, she looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. There was anger there, but also something calculating and cold. "You think you are so perfect, do not you, Miranda?" she said quietly. "Everyone always talks about how wonderful you are, how successful, how lucky Robert is to have you. You have no idea what it is like to live in your shadow." I was taken aback by her sudden hostility. "Jessica, I never meant to make you feel that way. We are family. I want you to succeed too." She stared at me for a long moment, and then something shifted in her expression. Her eyes filled with tears, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "You touched me, Miranda, when I was younger. You did things to me and told me never to tell anyone." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the blood drain from my face as I struggled to comprehend what she had just said. "What, Jessica? That never happened. I would never ever do something like that. What are you talking about?" But she was already standing up, tears streaming down her cheeks, her voice getting louder. "You said no one would believe me because you were the perfect one. You said it would be my word against yours." Before I could respond, she ran from the room, sobbing loudly. Within moments, the entire party had gathered around her as she collapsed into my aunt's arms, repeating her accusations between gasps and tears. I stood in the doorway watching in horror as my entire family's eyes turned toward me with expressions of shocked disgust and disbelief. My father's face went white. My mother covered her mouth with her hands. My grandfather, the man who had always called me his special girl, looked at me as if I were a stranger. Robert grabbed my arm and pulled me aside, asking in a harsh whisper what Jessica was talking about. The warm, loving atmosphere of the party had transformed into something cold and hostile in a matter of minutes. I tried to explain, tried to tell them that Jessica was lying, that I had never touched her inappropriately or said any of those things. But my words sounded hollow, even to my own ears, in the face of her tears and anguish. How do you prove a negative? How do you convince people that something never happened when someone is claiming it did with such apparent pain and conviction? The party ended abruptly. Family members left without saying goodbye, whispering among themselves and shooting glances in my direction. My parents drove me home in complete silence, and when we reached my apartment, my father simply said they needed time to think. That was the last normal conversation I would have with them for 10 years. The next morning, I woke up hoping it had all been a nightmare. But my phone remained silent, and when I called my parents' house, my mother answered with a voice I barely recognized and told me not to contact them again until I was ready to admit what I had done and get help. She hung up before I could respond. Within a week, the story had spread through our entire extended family and social circle. My brother, who had always been my closest confidant, left a voicemail saying he was disgusted and never wanted to see me again. My sister changed her phone number and blocked me on social media. Aunts and uncles who had watched me grow up and celebrated my achievements now treated me like a pariah. Robert broke up with me 3 days after the party. He said he could not be with someone capable of what Jessica described, regardless of whether he believed it or not. The doubt in his eyes as he packed his things from our shared apartment was perhaps more painful than losing him entirely. I realized that even if some people might have questioned Jessica's story, the mere possibility that it could be true was enough to destroy everything. My professional life began to crumble as well. Word spread through my company's offices, and colleagues who had once been friendly became distant and uncomfortable around me. Clients started requesting different account managers. My boss called me into his office and suggested I might want to consider finding opportunities elsewhere for the good of the company's reputation. I hired a lawyer, hoping there might be some legal recourse or way to clear my name. But Attorney Johnson explained that without physical evidence or witnesses, and given the nature of the allegations, there was little we could do. Jessica had not filed criminal charges, which meant there would be no investigation, no trial where the truth might emerge. She had simply shared her story with family, and that was enough to destroy my life. I wrote letters to every family member detailing my side of the story and begging them to consider that Jessica might be lying. I explained my confusion and pain, my absolute certainty that I had never harmed her in any way. Most of the letters went unanswered. The few responses I received were brief and cold, expressing disappointment that I continued to deny what they saw as obvious truth. Jessica, meanwhile, seemed to be thriving in her new role as victim and survivor. She started attending therapy sessions and joined a support group for abuse survivors. She posted frequently on social media about her healing journey and the importance of believing victims. Family members rallied around her, praising her courage for speaking out and offering their unwavering support. The final blow came when Jessica sent a detailed letter to my company's human resources department, repeating her allegations and expressing concern about my access to younger employees and interns. Within a month, I was let go from the job I had worked so hard to secure. My reputation in Cincinnati's tight-knit business community was destroyed. I fell into a deep depression that lasted months. Some nights, sitting alone in my empty apartment with no family, no boyfriend, no job, and no prospects, I wondered if life was worth continuing. The isolation was suffocating. I had gone from being surrounded by love and support to having no one who believed in my innocence or cared about my well-being. But somewhere in that darkness, I found a small flame of determination. I realized that if I was going to survive this, I would have to rebuild my life completely and prove my worth through my actions, even if I could never clear my name. I decided to move away and start over somewhere. No one knew my story. I relocated to Denver, Colorado, where the mountains reminded me that there were bigger things in the world than my small town drama. Starting over at 26 was terrifying, but it also felt liberating. I found a position with a smaller marketing firm and threw myself into work with an intensity born of necessity. The first few years were difficult. I was cautious about forming close relationships, always aware that my past could resurface and destroy any happiness I managed to build. But gradually, I began to heal. I went back to school part-time and earned my master's degree in business administration. I discovered a talent for digital marketing that served me well in the evolving business landscape. When I met David at a professional networking event 5 years after moving to Denver, I almost walked away. He was charming, successful, and kind, everything I had once hoped to find in a partner. But I was terrified of opening my heart again, knowing that I would eventually have to tell him about my past and risk losing him the way I had lost Robert. David surprised me. When I finally worked up the courage to tell him Jessica's story and my family's rejection, he listened carefully and then said something I will never forget. "Miranda, I have watched you for months. I have seen your character, your integrity, your compassion. I do not need to know what happened 10 years ago to know who you are today." We married 2 years later in a small ceremony attended by the few friends I had made in Denver. Our daughter Emma was born the following year, and for the first time since that terrible night at my grandfather's birthday party, I felt truly happy again. But there was always a shadow over my joy, the knowledge that my daughter would grow up never knowing her grandparents, aunts, uncles, and extended family, because of a lie that seemed to have taken on a life of its own. I often wondered about my family back in Ohio. I knew my grandfather had passed away from a heart attack 4 years after our estrangement, and the knowledge that he died believing I was capable of such horrible things haunted me. I wondered if my parents ever thought about me if they missed me the way I missed them, or if they had simply written me off as a lost cause. Jessica had continued to build her life around her victim narrative. Through mutual acquaintances and occasional internet searches, I learned that she had become something of a local advocate for abuse survivors. She spoke at community events and had even been featured in the local newspaper for her work. The irony was not lost on me that she was helping real victims, while having fabricated her own victimization. Then last spring, everything changed. I was at work when my phone rang with a number I recognized, but had not seen in years. It was my mother's cell phone. My hands shook as I answered, not knowing what to expect. "Miranda?" My mother's voice sounded older, more fragile than I remembered. "Can you talk?" "Mom." The word came out as barely a whisper. "What is wrong? Is everyone okay?" There was a long pause, and then I heard something I had not heard in 10 years. My mother crying. "Miranda, we know the truth now. We know what really happened. Jessica told us everything." I sat down heavily in my desk chair, my mind racing. "What do you mean she told you everything?" "She admitted she lied, sweetheart. She made it all up. We were so wrong, and I do not know how we are ever going to make this right." The conversation that followed revealed the shocking truth. Jessica had been struggling with alcohol and drug addiction for several years, a development that my family had tried to hide out of shame and denial. During a particularly bad binge, she had confessed to her roommate about fabricating the abuse allegations. The roommate, who happened to be the daughter of one of my mother's longtime friends, felt obligated to share this information. When confronted by my parents, Jessica initially denied the confession, claiming she had been drunk and saying nonsense. But under pressure from multiple family members and facing the threat of being cut off financially, she finally broke down and admitted the truth. She revealed that she had always been jealous of my success and attention I received from the family. The night of grandfather's birthday party, she had been drinking and feeling particularly resentful. The accusation had started as an impulsive attempt to hurt me, but when she saw how seriously everyone took it, she felt trapped into maintaining the lie. My mother explained that Jessica had built her entire adult identity around being an abuse survivor. She had received sympathy, attention, and support that she had never earned through her own accomplishments. Admitting the truth meant losing all of that and facing the consequences of having destroyed an innocent person's life and family relationships. The family was devastated. My parents were consumed with guilt and shame at having believed the lies and cut me out of their lives. My siblings were horrified at what their doubt and rejection had cost us all. Even my extended family, who had treated me like a criminal, were struggling to process their role in perpetuating this injustice. But I was not the same person who had been destroyed by their rejection 10 years earlier. I had built a life-found love, created a family of my own. Their apologies, while meaningful, could not erase the years of pain and isolation I had endured. When my father called 2 days after my mother's initial conversation, his voice was broken in a way I had never heard before. "Miranda, I failed you as a father. I should have known you better, should have trusted in who I raised you to be. Can you ever forgive us?" I listened as he and my mother took turns explaining their regret, their shame, their desperate desire to make amends. They wanted to fly to Denver immediately to meet their granddaughter, to try to rebuild what had been destroyed, but I was not ready to simply pick up where we had left off. "I need you to understand something," I told them during our third conversation. "I am not the same person I was 10 years ago. I have built a life here, and I have a family to protect. If you want to be part of our lives, there are going to be conditions." I required several things before I would consider reconciliation. First, Jessica had to provide a written confession, detailing her lies and admitting to the fabrication. This confession needed to be shared with every person who had been told the original story, including extended family friends, and anyone else who had been led to believe I was guilty of abuse. Second, my parents and siblings had to attend family therapy sessions to understand the impact of their actions and learn how to rebuild trust. I would not allow them back into my life, only to risk being abandoned again if future conflicts arose. Third, Jessica herself had to face consequences for her actions. I insisted she enter genuine therapy to address whatever underlying issues had led her to destroy my life, and she needed to make financial restitution for the career damage and therapy costs I had incurred. Finally, I made it clear that rebuilding our relationship would be a gradual process. They would need to respect my boundaries, accept that I had changed, and understand that my husband and daughter were now my primary family. To their credit, my family agreed to all of my conditions without hesitation. Jessica wrote a detailed confession that was embarrassing and humiliating for her, but necessary for my vindication. She admitted to making up the entire story out of jealousy and acknowledged the devastating impact of her lies on my life. This confession was sent to every family member, friend, and community member who had been told the original allegations. My parents flew to Denver a month later for what was perhaps the most emotional weekend of my life. Meeting their granddaughter for the first time reduced my mother to tears that seemed to last for hours. My father, who had always been stoic and reserved, held Emma with shaking hands and whispered apologies to both of us. David was gracious and welcoming, though I could see the protective way he watched every interaction. He had supported me through my healing process and was not about to let anyone hurt me again. Emma, now 3 years old, was curious about these new grandparents, but naturally gravitated toward the people who had always been present in her life. The family therapy sessions were difficult, but necessary. My siblings participated via video calls, and we worked through years of pain, regret, and broken trust with Dr. Morrison, a skilled therapist who specialized in family reconciliation. It became clear that my family's willingness to believe Jessica's lies stemmed from their own discomfort with the topic of sexual abuse and their failure to ask the right questions or seek proper guidance. Jessica herself was required to attend individual therapy and participate in several family sessions. Seeing her again was surreal. She had aged poorly, and the years of addiction and lying had taken a visible toll. Her apology was tearful and seemed genuine, though I found it difficult to feel much sympathy for her, given what she had cost me. She explained that the lie had started impulsively, but became impossible to retract once the family reacted so strongly. She had been trapped in a web of her own creation, receiving attention and sympathy that felt good, even though it was based on deception. Each family gathering where she was treated as a survivor made it harder to admit the truth. I did not forgive her immediately, nor did I pretend that her explanation excused what she had done. But I could see that she was genuinely remorseful and committed to making amends. She entered a comprehensive treatment program and began working to rebuild her own life on a foundation of honesty rather than deception. The reconciliation with my family has been a slow process that continues to this day. My parents visit Denver several times a year, and we have started including them in major holidays and family celebrations. Emma adores her grandparents and has no understanding of the complicated history that kept them apart for the first years of her life. My relationship with my siblings has also healed, though it looks different than it did before. We are more cautious with each other, more aware of how quickly trust can be broken and how long it takes to rebuild. But there is genuine love there, and a shared commitment to not letting anything come between us again. I learned that my grandfather had talked about me frequently before his death, expressing regret about the estrangement and wondering if there might have been another side to the story. This knowledge brought both comfort and sadness, knowing that he had doubts, but died before the truth emerged. The most important lesson I have learned from this experience is that sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalyst for discovering our own strength and resilience. The 10 years I spent estranged from my family were painful, but they also forced me to build an independent life and develop a strong sense of self-worth that was not dependent on others' approval. I am grateful for my husband who loved me despite my complicated past, and for my daughter who will grow up knowing that her mother survived something terrible and came out stronger. I am even grateful in a strange way for the experience itself, because it taught me that I could lose everything and still find a way to build a meaningful life. My family relationships are deeper and more honest now than they ever were before. We do not take each other for granted anymore, and we have learned the importance of asking hard questions and seeking truth even when it is uncomfortable. Jessica's lies forced us all to confront our own weaknesses and grow stronger together. The pain of those lost years will never completely disappear, but it has been transformed into wisdom and strength that serves me well as a mother, wife, and human being. Sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is the knowledge that we can survive anything and still choose love over bitterness. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to rebuild and move forward? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, I would be grateful if you would like this video and subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's most difficult challenges. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it is possible to rebuild after devastating loss. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings you hope that truth and justice, even when delayed, can still prevail. Remember that your current situation is not your final destination.